the Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast featuring the Crop Doctors.
Good morning from the Crop Doctors podcast studio in Stoneville. Tom, I should let you done the intro.
That's okay. No, I get it.
Since it's just
Since
me
we're
and
going to
you
be
in
talking
here.
your topic and it's just the two of us, but that's fine. That's how we've done things.
So Tom and I walked over to the Cap Center this morning to talk about goosegrass. Tom, I know that we did an episode last year on maybe goosegrass and others, because I think Hunter Bowman was here with us, and then we had Larry Steckel on the phone. We've talked about Johnson grass with Daniel multiple times, and of course ryegrass, at other times of the year. Something dedicated specifically to goosegrass. I think if you include that one we did with Hunter and Larry last year, this is at least the second, maybe even the third year in a row that about this time of year, or we've sat down and talked about goosegrass or grass control in general in our row crops. And like I said, we hit Johnson grass pretty hard there a few weeks ago. So if you need help on Johnson grass, call me. And I don't know how much help I can actually be, or go back and listen to that episode we did a few weeks ago with Daniel Stevenson from LSU Ag Center. Daniel knows way more about Johnson grass than I'll ever know.
Because Tom will just add that driving around and looking around this year, it looks like we have some places that Johnson grass needs some attention. That's the nicest way to make that statement, and it's pretty widespread throughout the state. So,
yep,
a good topic to talk about.
Tom, I got a question for you. I know the answer to it before I ask it because you weren't here yesterday.
Okay.
And I didn't send it to you. Have you seen the picture of the bear that was running around Stoneville the last couple of days?
No.
All right, so I got a video on text yesterday midday, and it was a bear, black bear, not huge bear, and it's like playground equipment in the background. And then that dude busts a cornfield, just poof, just disappears into the corn. So I text the guy back, like, where was that at? Racket Club. And it looked familiar. So it's at the Racket Club. So I get here, I was driving. I wasn't texting and driving. So I get here and I asked the guys that work for me, I said, hey, did y'all see the picture of the bear? And one of them's like, yeah, it was right over here, pointing the exact opposite direction from the Racket Club. I was like, no, it was south. That direction the Racket Club is from our building. And we'll come to find out, somebody else has seen the bear the day before, assuming it's the same bear. So I was going to ask you.
No, I haven't.
Had you seen, or I did ask you, had
What's
you seen the bear?
What's fascinating is the days that I have been here, I've been around, and I've been around your guys down there at Herbicide Mixing. We'll just call it that for lack of a better descriptor, and nobody's brought that up.
Well, I think this is a this week.
So have you seen the picture of the crawfish down there that's protecting the magic marker?
No.
Okay. Somebody obviously got territorial about their magic marker, so they taped it in the claw of a dead crawfish, and it says, don't, expletive, move the marker. And then somebody flippantly underneath it wrote, I moved it. And I don't think your guys know who put that there, and I certainly don't know who put that there.
I was going to say that could certainly be my people messing with each other, but
I think it's got Mangialardi written all over it, but it may not, because Mangialardi and I have a little thing going back and forth when we're down there with one another. It's always hilarious interaction.
Well, both of you use a lot of words.
We can use a lot of words. Goosegrass. Obviously, that's a hot topic right now because you're clearly fielding some telephone calls. So how do you want to set the stage for that? You want to talk a little bit about background?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. Let's talk about why it's important, and then we'll move into like stages, what sizes you should be considering important for management.
I don't remember specifically what we talked about when Hunter and Larry were on with us last year. I mean, I assume we talked about most of the same things that you and I will talk about here today. But Hunter would have started the first summer that he worked was 2019 here. So the project that he did started taking shape out of 2018. I mean, what we were seeing in 17 and 18 led into Hunter's project. So Hunter's whole project was controlling grass in extend crops because we were having such a difficult time doing that in those early years of using extend. Possibly a lot of reasons for that. I think there's certainly at times there's antagonism between glyphosate and the auxin, in this case, dicamba. I think it would probably have been similar with 2,4-D and Enlist, and we say this a lot of that is economy of scale. We had a lot more extend than we had Enlist, therefore we saw it more often in extend than Enlist. Either way, we were having trouble controlling grass in extend crops, and at the time, so this is like 17, 18, right? I would have said, and I did say, it's just whatever grass you have. You know, the grass that's most prominent, or the species that's most prominent in your field is the one that you're having a difficult time controlling. And I think at the time that was accurate. And every year is unique, and weather's unique from year to year. Over the past probably 4 years now, it's almost exclusively goosegrass in these same conversations. So an early post herbicide application in extend soybeans or cotton, I'm having a difficult time controlling goosegrass. To the point that probably 22, Tom, from maybe the middle of May until the middle of July, not every single call I got was about goosegrass, but the majority of the calls I got were about goosegrass. I thought at the time that we can't get worse than this, and this is a unique intersection of weed size and the time that our planting dates forced our post-emergence applications into this window. It was dry, it was hot, and it's just a 2022 thing. Well, then in 2023, it was almost as bad on call volume. So the problem was almost as bad. Same thing, still hot and dry, but very different, right? Those two dry periods did not necessarily coincide between 22 and 23.
Both dry years, but terribly different in their period of drought.
Roll into 2024, our planting dates are, in general, all things considered, a little bit later than usual with the weather that we had through parts of March and most of April. So our application window shifted a little bit, but most areas have not been dry yet. We've got some that are approaching getting dry. We've got some water going out now on soybeans, but I think the water I've seen running at least has been on great big beans that are way past the point of making a herbicide application. But probably, so today's, whatever today is, 13th.
It's the 13th.
13th of June. Probably around Memorial Day, maybe the week before even, I got a call about goosegrass, and then it's just progressively picked up from there. Nowhere like the previous 2 years, but it's still a consistent question. I cannot kill goosegrass in my cotton or in my soybeans. Again, almost always extend, but still that's the majority of what we have technology-wise is extend.
And that's what I was going to say. Most of those then obviously are follow-up calls. We've made an application. This is what we applied. We've not been able to kill it. What do you attribute that to? Is it the herbicide mixture? Is it the size of the weed that we're attempting to kill with the herbicide mixture? Or is it both situations?
It's everything. If I laid out all the stuff that Hunter Bowman did when he was in school, and Hunter did a lot, we just basically shotgunned stuff. He did mixtures. He did nozzles, he did water volume, he did mixture with like foliar fertilizers, mixtures with residual herbicides. He did stuff like sprayed some really low rates of dicamba on grass with no crop to see if like dicamba drift influenced the level of grass control you would get with Roundup and or clethodim after the fact.
Well, and that's the thing. I just want to point out there the conversation that you and I have just about every year when we're attempting to manage plots. And the thing that you try to impress upon me is if you ding it up, you're likely not going to kill it. That's
fact.
The attributed type of research situation that Hunter was getting into.
Right.
If we ding it up, can you still clobber it coming back with an application after something like that happens in the prevailing environment?
The frustrating thing about Hunter's project after the fact, when it was all said and done, we learned a lot, but there was a lot of things that one year would clearly influence the level of control we got. For example, mixtures with dicamba. One year, no question about it, we compromised control. Our case was barnyard grass because that's the primary grass that we had to work with. And again, this was before every question was about goosegrass. But we very clearly antagonized the control with glyphosate one year. Well, the next year it might not do anything. The one thing I think that has consistently influenced, and this is not news by any means, is when it gets hot, our control goes down. And what's hot probably depends. For example, hot in 2024 is not hot in 2022 because you think about our crop has developed and therefore our weeds have developed in a pretty high moisture environment up to this point. So at the point that it does turn hot, we don't have the root system that we may have had in other years. So that's even saying it's hot. And even if I say, all right, above, pick a number, 85 degrees, control starts falling off. Well, that may be true in one year and not the next year, depending on what has happened before that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that's not something I think we discuss, because environment can play into how you're attempting to manage something in the crop season, and every year's different, and that's a huge difference.
Yeah, that is the story. That's the take home, is every year is different, and if it worked this year doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work next year. So Hunter and I talked. What do we get out of all this work that he did? And I had heard Larry Steckel say this related to some other things. I think the really bad resistant barnyard grass that he has in parts of West Tennessee, that it's just kind of a checklist of things that add up. For example, I said the mixtures hurt sometimes but don't hurt other times. Okay, so maybe that mixture is worth 5%. So I'm taking, if you just say 100%, so complete control. Well, this mixture takes that from 100 to 95. Well, then I make an application of that mixture when the temperature is hot, say 90 degrees. Well, then that takes it from 95 to 90. Well, then I use a low water volume instead of a high water volume, and maybe that takes 90 to 80. And so you have this list of things that conspire together to bring your control down to a level that's unacceptable. And that's the best that we ever came up with, because it was so inconsistent from one year to the next, which means one environment to the next. So what happens in Tunica County doesn't necessarily happen the same in Sharkey County.
Yeah, we get that. Sometimes that's a hard playing field to even sit and consider, because the environment has been so different across the state this year. I mean, you pointed out, it's dry on the most eastern half, like Brian pointed out a couple of weeks ago. It's dry in Starkville. It was dry in Brooksville. I was there yesterday. You get into Webster County, west of there, not very far, still moist.
Oh, yeah, there's still people planting.
Yeah, absolutely.
In places.
And then you get up into North Mississippi, and when I was there 10, 11, 12 days ago, whenever that was, I was through there on a Sunday, there's places they haven't planted anything because it has stayed so wet for so long.
Goosegrass, I think, not a widely studied weed species over the years. I had my guys go look for old literature in the weed science journals about goosegrass. And you know me, I'm not big on reading literature, right?
Well, I was going to say, your office is pretty clean and tidy. You don't have volumes of old issues in there. That's Tom's office.
That's
not Jason's office.
Not our style. But we went and looked, because I was desperate, because I got no answer to these questions I'm getting about it over the last couple of years. My guy, Will Eubank, Alex Mangialardi, they went and looked. They found what was available, which wasn't very much. And then I guess I didn't believe them, so I went and looked. And I didn't find anything that they hadn't already found. If you look at that work that was done, and most of that is going to be around the development of I started to say the group number, but I'm not even 100% sure which group number it is, but the ACC ACE herbicides. So that's clethodim, that's Fusilade, that's Assure, those products. a lot of that work was done as those were being developed through the 80s, maybe into the early 90s. A lot of mixture stuff. And I think if you go and really read it, what you can find is you can find something that somebody did to tell you what you want to hear. For example, if you want to hear that it's easy to antagonize grass control with clethodim or with Fusilade, you can find somebody to tell you that. If you want to find somebody that tells you that's not the case, you can find that too. And if you put all that together, the answer is the same as what Hunter and I are saying 30 years later. It's really inconsistent, and it really depends. Now, if you call me on the phone and ask me a question and my answer is it depends, well, you're probably hating on me pretty good, because that's not an answer. That's not helping you any go and solve a problem. But in this case, I think it actually is just that complicated. So if you look at that old stuff that was done,
boil that down.
So
what's the take-home message?
The common denominator is a whole lot of stuff, different herbicide stuff, kills goosegrass. But all that stuff was sprayed on 2 to 3 inch goosegrass.
And
for
2 to 3 listening to that, that's small. That's the size of your index finger.
Right. So you think about, we always talk about herbicide timing with pigweeds, and if a palmer gets to 3 or 4 inches, your control is going to start going down. It's going to start getting inconsistent. So a 2 to 3 inch goosegrass is every bit as frustrating to find, scout in the field, as a 1 to 2 inch palmer amaranth is. I mean, you got to be looking to find it. So the products that were in all that stuff is Fusilade, clethidim's in there, glyphosate's in there, Liberty's in there, Liberty being marginal. So like a mixture with Liberty and clethidim, you can find stuff that says the control is going to go down significantly. So then you get to thinking, all right, what do these fields look like in 2022, 3, 4 when we're making these applications? And a lot of times it's these big mats of goosegrass. Maybe they're twice as big as a truck, and it's a flat mat. The stuff grows flat on the ground. And then as the seed heads come out, those kind of point up toward the sky. So it makes kind of a mat. But if you go find an individual plant and clump it up, it's going to have a bunch of tillers on it. So I've never been able to really tease out, is it there when we plant? And so by the time we get to the point of making these post-emergence applications, is it just so much bigger than everything else? And so then you got a combination of large size, a herbicide mixture, maybe low water volume. And again, you got that group of circumstances that come together to drive the control down to an unacceptable level. Or are our residual herbicides that we use at planting, and granted, the number of acres that get treated with the residual at planting in the age of extend is lower than it was pre-extend. I'll grant you that. But are those residuals better on, say, a barnyard grass or a large crabgrass than they are on goosegrass? I don't see that in my plots. We have some goosegrass. It's by no means the worst grass that we have. But if I go try to kill it, I'll kill it with just about any treatment that would be effective on it. So I can't ever get the poor control.
Well, and then is there a common denominator in these field situations whereby they have not put out a residual herbicide?
I've never been able, no. Okay. I've never been able to tease that out. A lot of time, if there is a common denominator, it's size. It's a big plant, but that's not 100%. I mean, we've sprayed some smaller plants, but again, hitting a 2 to 3 inch plant, do you ever even know you killed it?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. The pictures you showed when we were talking about this before we started recording, a 2 to 3 inch in general size goosegrass has no tillers.
Yeah.
The number of people that might be able to actually identify that at the field level, probably not really high.
Right. And you see those bigger plants. And so then if those don't die, then those are the ones that didn't die. But did you kill a whole lot? Because they're not all the exact same size. I mean, if you got big ones out there, there's little ones too. Same kind of discussion we have with clethodim. and Italian ryegrass. The clethodim label for Italian ryegrass size at application is 2 to 6 inches. We never spray 2 to 6 inch ryegrass, or hardly ever spray 2 to 6 inch ryegrass. There are some plants out there that are that size when the field gets treated. So is the goosegrass the same kind of deal? We kill a lot of it. We just don't realize that we kill a lot of it because the ones that aren't controlled are so obviously not controlled.
And that's a good rhetorical question.
Yeah.
I don't know. And that's a hard one sometimes to think when you're on the fly asking those questions. With all that said, Jason, and that's really good background information, and I think covers some important topics. What do we do about that weed moving forward this season in 2024?
Similar to all of our discussions about ryegrass and then the discussion we had with Daniel about Johnson grass, there's a couple of things that work on goosegrass after it comes out of the ground. Neither of those is a complete slam dunk. So in the case of goosegrass, it's glyphosate and clethodim. And those other ACCase herbicides are effective too. There's just not as much of those. There's not the volume in circulation. So we always default to clethodim. So definitely have glyphosate-resistant goosegrass in the state of Mississippi. To my knowledge.
How widespread is that?
Well, that's what I was going to say. To my knowledge, that's fairly isolated in the North Delta. That's not to say there's not some otherwise, but you also don't all of a sudden have a resistance. You all of a sudden don't have resistance in a weed species from one end of the state to the other, basically overnight, which is what would appear to have happened in this case just based on call volume a few years ago. So glyphosate is still effective on it if it's not a resistant population, if timed correctly. I think clethodim is effective on it if timed correctly, and then I would even add clethodim is probably a little bit more sensitive to the temperature and moisture condition at the time of application than glyphosate.
And there's no clethodim resistance in Mississippi that's been confirmed.
Not that I've ever seen. Not that I've ever seen.
Okay.
But a lot of our first post treatments are going out targeting palmer amaranth. So in extend crops, that's almost always glyphosate and dicamba. So then you have compromised control, and then those plants continue to grow in the time frame after that first treatment before we get another treatment on it. I've never liked telling a guy, hey man, you're going to have to split these out and make 2 applications, because that's inefficient at best, right?
Yeah.
So it depends on how bad it is, whether that's a good tactic to use. And I think we have areas where goosegrass is bad enough to justify, making an application of dicamba, targeting pigweed, and then making a separate application several days later. And there's no, I say 7 days, 5 days, maybe 10 days is probably better. I think the longer you wait, the better, but then you got to, you can only wait as long as is practical. So separating those applications, we've generally, our go-to has been adding the clethodim to the glyphosate plus dicamba. And that's a mixed bag, man. It's a mixed bag how effective that's been. And it was a mixed bag in Hunter's work with barnyard grass when he was in school too. I don't have the utmost of confidence in that. Liberty, we use a lot of Liberty right now for Johnson grass. I think Liberty turns goosegrass yellow. I think you feel good about it for a few days. I don't know how effective it is at actually killing that plant, because there's a response to the herbicide, and then there's average to fair to good control, and then there's that plant actually dying, and that's a continuum, right? That's a scale from, in my case, the way I talk about weed control, 40% to 100%, and I want 100.
Yeah, 40% is not great.
Yeah, 40%. I just know I sprayed something on it. That didn't answer your question, Tom.
No,
there's no right answer, or there's not an answer. But I think the biggest thing is the timing, which is hard. It's a hard nut to crack, because I don't know why it's so big at the time that we need to be spraying our beans and cotton. And then it's the temperature at application and the moisture condition, which of course, we have zero control over.
And that I was going to say, that's a mixed bag this year too, statewide, wherever you're at. And it is every year. Appreciate the time, man.
That was however many minutes of not an answer, but those are the conversations that I've been having, and whatever I just said for the last few minutes sounds a lot like the phone conversations that I have, and I'm just as frustrated with it as everybody else is. I will also say, and having Larry last year was validation of that. It's not unique to Mississippi.
No, I think y'all as weed scientists nationally struggle with grass management, regardless of what the grass species is.
And it's been complicated in the age of these newest generation herbicide-resistant traits.
Yeah, and that I don't think that's going to get any easier. It will be a bit more challenging next year, and I'm sure we will probably have a fairly similar conversation, only at a different time.
All right, man. Well, go do your stuff. I appreciate you coming over here on short notice this morning.
Anytime. Thank you.
And I hope that's beneficial for somebody. But again, if you have a specific goosegrass problem or question, please just call me and I'll try to work through it with you.
The Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.